I'm Tania Rogers, and you're listening to Mindful Hustler, the podcast helping entrepreneurs get out of their heads and onto building their dreams. Together, we're building businesses while balancing minds. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Mindful Hustle podcast. I'm your host, Tania Rogers. I am a psychotherapist and a fellow entrepreneur, and I started this podcast because it's really what I needed years ago. Years ago, when I was searching for what my purpose was, and I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know how to hone in on all of my passions that I had. I was working jobs that I hated, that it felt like was sucking the soul out of me. And it really led to a lot of anxiety and depression and anger, all of the things. I felt really lost. And I think it was especially hard for me being someone in the field of psychology. I wasn't a psychotherapist at the time, but I was in the field, and I know the mind so well, but I didn't know how to get out of my own mind and my own way. And so I started this podcast to really talk about the struggles that aspiring entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs already go through, and also just people who are really looking to find what they're really passionate about and turn it into a purposeful and meaningful career for themselves and a business. So I want to talk about some of my rock bottom moments in this first episode, because I know a lot of you out there are currently experiencing it. As a therapist, I talk to so many clients who are going through what I went through years ago, and it really leads them to feel really lost. And so my first rock bottom moment, I was working in the city years ago. This was over 10 years ago. And I had just finished grad school. I was in a job that I thought I would really love because it was, in the field that I was in. But I ended up really, really, really hating it. It wasn't so much of the work. The work felt really mindless. And so at first I thought, oh, this is easy. I could do this. But the longer I sat in the job, the more my soul felt like it died. Even just the environment. Like if you could picture the Matrix, where Neo worked in the beginning of the Matrix, and it was just like a row of cubicles, and the floor looked really dingy, the lighting was bad. That was where I was working. That's how it felt. Nobody really felt passionate about what they did. Everyone was just kind of there, to get a paycheck. And I guess so was I, really. But I really started to feel like a mouse on a hamster wheel. I punch in, I punch out, I come home exhausted. The work that I did just didn't feel like it was really changing lives. It really didn't feed my soul. And I was really depressed. It led to a really extreme depression. And I didn't know it at the time. I just knew I was sad. But, there were days where I didn't want to get out of bed. And my partner, my boyfriend at the time, now husband, I would say to him, I'm just going to call out this morning. I don't feel like going in. And it was like a running joke with all my friends. I would show them the text message, oh, calling out again for the 15th time. And they were all just really surprised that I wasn't fired yet. But it was a really dark time, honestly. I really just didn't know what I was doing and why I was doing it. I just knew this is what I'm supposed to do, right? I'm supposed to get this job in the city after grad school, in my field, and, um, you know, all of the things. I had financial obligations at that time too. I bought a condo I really had no business buying because I really wasn't making that much money. That's a story for a later date. But bottom line is I felt really scared to pivot, but I knew I had to make a change. And my rock bottom moment came. This is actually a really funny story. And I tell it and I laugh now, but at the time it felt like it was going to break me. So there's a train station in my town that leads into the city, and it was a really, really cold winter day. And I walked to the train station, and this particular train station is outdoors. So it was freezing. I walked there, waited and waited and waited for the train for a long time. it never came. There's also a bus that it doesn't exist now, but it led into the city from where I am, New Jersey. And I walked up the street to the bus stop. Freezing, right? It feels like it was under 0 degree weather. And I waited and waited and waited, no bus, right? So then, and mind you, I hated being a commuter. I know some people love the commuter life. I hated it. I'm not a commuter. It was exhausting, but I did it. And so I remember walking from the bus stop now, and I said, okay, let me check the train stations. Maybe it got canceled and there's another train coming. I walked back. It was so cold that I took my phone out to call my boyfriend at the time, and my phone actually froze because that's how cold it was. So I couldn't even get him to pick me up. So I really had no choice but to wait. So um I'm walking back towards the train station, and all of a sudden I hear the train coming. Uh, I'm not I'm not close enough for the train to actually see me, and so I start running in like my big jacket. There's ice and snow everywhere. It's freezing out. I'm running, 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 and at some point I'm like, okay, this train is not going to wait for me. It's going to stop, and I'm not going to make it. I'm running and running and running until I finally slip on ice, fly up in the air. Whatever I was holding flew up to, landed on my butt, and the train passed me by. It did not stop. And I just remember feeling like, oh my God, like this cannot be life. This cannot be my life right now. And I stayed down for a good minute. Like I literally just had to ponder life. And it was that moment where I said to myself, I am leaving this job if it's the last thing I do, if it kills me, because if I don't leave it, it will kill me. And then I said, you know what? I have to make a plan. I have to figure my next move out. I don't want to keep hopping from place to place, but at the same time, I don't know what I even would do next. So I quit probably like less than 60 days later. I know it was still the winter because I left in February. Um, yeah, and I quit cold turkey. I don't recommend doing that, by the way. I was in my 20s at the time. Even though I had some financial responsibility, I didn't have a whole lot. But I was just so fed up, and I actually had just moved in with my boyfriend at the time, and that caused a lot of havoc. My husband and I can talk about it now, but it really, it was a thing. But yeah, I quit. I quit. I could not take it. I could not sit another day in that cubicle feeling like I wasn't living up to my potential, feeling like life was passing me by. And then on top of that, not only was I unhappy, but I also, whenever I wanted a vacation, I needed to ask. I needed to ask for time off. I know that's regular and corporate, but for me, for my inner childhood wounds, because there are a lot of those, I now realize as a therapist, I need autonomy. I can't have certain controls over me because I will feel restricted and in a box, and I'll rebel. So feeling that way, I realized, okay, maybe entrepreneurship is for me. I just don't know what that even means and what that could look like. So yeah, I went on a whole self-exploration journey. I know my friends thought, I was going through like not even a midlife crisis, just a crisis, because I hopped from job to job to job after that, just trying to figure it out. I now know that there's an easier way to do it, but at the time, I just needed to explore. I worked at a yoga studio, just even volunteering actually for a little bit as a karma yogi. And that was the greatest experience. I actually ended up going through a teacher training program and became a yoga teacher as well. But then after that, I worked at like a wellness center. I worked at a chiropractic office, like the front desk. And mind you, I had a master's degree from Columbia. My family thought I was crazy. I was doing all of these like odd jobs, and they're like, what are you doing? Like, you left your corporate job that paid you a decent amount for a recent, graduate student, and now you're working the front desk at like the Y? Like, what are you doing? So yeah, I went through a whole identity crisis, and I finally landed a job that I felt like, okay, like this could be it for a little bit. It's not exactly my own business. I didn't know what that would look like, but maybe I can learn how a business works from the inside, and then I could eventually do my own thing. That was my thinking. So I got a job at a community community health agency, and I did case management. And so I was in the field, like going from house to house, working with people with various mental health conditions. Um, and then it eventually that led me to my second breakdown, my second rock bottom moment. So I worked in that job for like 4 years, and it was during COVID that I had a really, really dark rock bottom moment, like a lot of people out there during COVID, right? So I remember it was COVID. It was the very beginning where we didn't really even know what it was. We just knew there were little cases popping up. The stay-at-home order had just been put into place, and we were all working from home. I think because I started working from home, it highlighted what I was doing like on a hour by hour basis. And my work again started to feel really like meaningless. Like it didn't feel like it was serving my soul. And then on top of that, I still hated the fact that if I needed time off, I had to ask permission, and they could very well say no because, we don't have coverage or what have you. Even if I were to take an unpaid day off, it was like, well, no, we still have to approve you. That did not sit well with me. I hated that. I hated that so much. And so during COVID, the stay-at-home order was in place, and the company got us all essential worker badges, meaning we could bypass the stay-at-home order and go out and work. That killed me. That was really scary. I remember on one particular meeting, the COO came on, and she's never on meetings with us, but she came on and she basically bullied us into going into the field and meeting with people face to face, going in their homes. And I just remember feeling like, wow, like I'm at the point where like my health and wellness is in the hands of a company, right? Like my wellness is in the hands of someone who just wants me to get out there and make money. Like I felt like the corporate prostitute, for a lack of better words. Like it really felt really demeaning. And like on one hand, I know that was the work, but it just felt like they did not care if we were afraid to get sick. It was like throw on a mask. And mind you, I was not a nurse or a doctor, or some people really do need to get out there and save lives, right? And thank you for that. Thank you. Because without essential workers, who knows where we would be, right? Like we wouldn't be far. But I particularly did not feel like an essential worker during that time because my work could have been remote. But the company knew face to face made more money, and they wanted to send us out there in the middle of COVID. So that was my second rock bottom moment. And I said to myself, okay, I cannot go through this again. I felt extremely depressed. There were days where I really didn't even want to get up out of bed. I was sad. I was angry. I was really confused because again, I was in the field of mental health. I wasn't a therapist yet, but I was in the field, and I felt like, why can't I control my mind? Why is my mind controlling me? And I'm such a passionate person. How do I take all of these things that I know I'm passionate about and make it into a business? And so I finally launched my company, The Root Studio, and I had to just get out of my head. I had to really work through that. It took a lot. It took me doing a lot of soul searching, thinking about what kind of lifestyle I really wanted, thinking about the childhood wounds that are really keeping me stuck and not allowing me to spread my wings and figure this out. I had a lot of dimming my own light. I was playing safe and playing small because that felt safe to me, right? Like I didn't want to poke my neck out and shine too bright. I felt like in the past, when I would do that, I made other people feel uncomfortable. And so I learned to shrink myself, really. And then on top of that, I had a real fear of going for something and then it not being right, and then everyone seeing me fail, or everyone seeing me making all of these shifts and I look like I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm in my 30s and like, what are you doing? That kept me stuck. I had a fear of criticism. I had so many fears. I had a fear of being wrong, right? Like with the information that I provided people, I feared everything. Everything kept me stuck until I said, you know what? I'm going to take everything that I really love, yoga, therapy, wellness in general, workshops, and put it all together. And I'm going to launch a wellness studio. And that's what I did. So I launched my wellness studio, the Root Studio. I didn't have it all figured out, but I knew the little bits that I liked. And now, years later, it brings me such a sense of joy, and it's evolving. And I always love to tell that story, because when people ask me like, "Oh, how did you find like your passion, and how were you able to turn that into a business?" I like to tell them like it didn't come easy. It came from a lot of rock bottom moments, and then me really getting deep with myself and figuring out, what do you really want, right? Like, what is it that you like, and why do you have to put yourself in a box? I had this thing where I thought I had to do like one thing so that it looked digestible for people. And once I got over that, it really allowed me to put everything together that I loved. And I didn't care if people didn't get it. Sometimes I didn't get it, and I was just figuring it out. I later realized, okay, I hit a wall, and I said, okay, I actually really do need to go back to school and get another master's degree to actually become a licensed therapist. That took a lot out of me, because I already went through a master's degree, especially at a really expensive institution. Columbia is not cheap. I'm still paying for that. But I eventually, once I was sure that I wanted to be a therapist and that I wanted to incorporate it in the wellness studio, that's what I did. Yeah. I love sharing my rock bottom moments, and then also sharing my perspective as a therapist, and also talking about the mental gymnastics that I did on my journey to entrepreneurship. Because now when I talk to clients, so many people are going through the same thing, and so many people feel really purposeless because of it, and depressed and anxious. So this podcast is going to serve as community. I have amazing guests on here who are all entrepreneurs, who all have found their sparks and have turned it into their mission and a beautiful business that they use to serve the world. And we really dive into how they did it. We dive into the mental hurdles that kept them stuck, and how they learned to overcome it, and some of the mental gymnastics that they still do today, and how they overcome that. And so I'm so excited to do this and to talk to all of you. And I just really look forward to all of the episodes to come. I hope this serves you as your community and support and resource for entrepreneurship, and for getting out of your own head so that you can build your dreams. Thanks so much for listening. If you like this episode and you don't want to miss another, make sure you subscribe. See you next time.